This genie, whose name was Danhash, recognized Maymun with terror, for he knew the supremacy which her goodness gave her over him. He would gladly have avoided her altogether, but they were so near that he must either be prepared to fight or yield to her, so he at once addressed her in a conciliatory tone. "Good Maymun, swear to me by Allah to do me no harm, and on my side I will promise not to injure you." "Accursed genie," replied Maymun, "what harm can you do me? But I will grant your power and give the promise you ask. And now tell me what you have seen and done tonight." "Fair lady," said Danhash, "you meet me at the right moment to hear something really interesting. I must tell you that I come from the furthest end of China, which is one of the largest and most powerful kingdoms in the world. The present king has one only daughter, who is so perfectly lovely that neither you, nor I, nor any other creature could find adequate terms in which to describe her marvelous charms. You must therefore picture to yourself the most perfect features, joined to a brilliant and delicate complexion and an enchanting expression, and even then imagination will fall short of the reality. The king, her father, has carefully shielded this treasure from the vulgar gaze, and has taken every precaution to keep her from the sight of everyone except the happy mortal he may choose to be her husband. But in order to give her variety in her confinement, he has built her 7 palaces such as have never been seen before. The first palace is entirely composed of rock crystal, the second of bronze, the third of fine steel, the fourth of another and more precious species of bronze, the fifth of touchstone, the sixth of silver, and the seventh of solid gold. They are all most sumptuously furnished, whilst the gardens surrounding them are laid out with exquisite taste. In fact, neither trouble nor cost has been spared to make this retreat agreeable to the princess. The report of her wonderful beauty has spread far and wide, and many powerful kings have sent embassies to ask her hand in marriage. The king has always received these embassies graciously, but says that he will never oblige the princess to marry against her will, and as she regularly declines each fresh proposal, the envoys have had to leave as disappointed in the result of their missions as they were gratified by their magnificent receptions. "Sire," said the princess to her father, "you wish me to marry, and I know you desire to please me, for which I am very grateful. But indeed I have no inclination to change my state, for where could I find so happy a life amidst so many beautiful and delightful surroundings? I feel that I could never be as happy with any husband as I am here, and I beg you not to press one on me." At last an embassy came from a king so rich and powerful that the king of China felt constrained to urge this suit on his daughter. He told her how important such an alliance would be and pressed her to consent. In fact, he pressed her so persistingly that the princess at length lost her temper and quite forgot the respect due to her father. "Sire," cried she angrily, "do not speak further of this or any other marriage, or I will plunge this dagger in my breast and so escape from all these importunities." The king of China was extremely indignant with his daughter and replied, "You have lost your senses and you must be treated accordingly." So he had her shut in one set of rooms in one of her palaces and only allowed her 10 old women, of whom her nurse was the head, to wait on her and keep her company. He next sent letters to all the kings who had sued for the princess's hand, begging they would think of her no longer, as she was quite insane, and he desired his various envoys to make it known that anyone who could cure her should have her to wife. "Fair Maymun," continued Danhash, "this is the present state of affairs. I never pass a day without going to gaze on this incomparable beauty, and I am sure that if you would only accompany me, you would think the sight well worth the trouble, and own that you never saw such loveliness before." The fairy only answered with a peal of laughter, and when at length she had control of her voice, she cried, "Oh, come, you are making game of me. I thought you had something really interesting to tell me instead of raving about some unknown damsel. What would you say if you could see the prince I have just been looking at, and whose beauty is really transcendent? That is something worth talking about. You would certainly quite lose your head. Charming Maimoun, asked Danhash, may I inquire who and what is the prince of whom you speak? No, replied Maimoun, that he is in much the same case as your princess. The king, his father, wanted to force him to marry, and on the prince's refusal to obey, he has been imprisoned in an old tower where I have just seen him. I don't like to contradict a lady, said Danhash, but you must really permit me to doubt any mortal being as beautiful as my princess. Hold your tongue, cried Maimoun. I repeat, that is impossible. Well, I don't wish to seem obstinate, replied Danhash. The best plan to test the truth of what I say will be for you to let me take you to see the princess for yourself. There is no need for that, retorted Maimoun. We can satisfy ourselves in another way. Bring your princess here and lay her down beside my prince. We can then compare them at leisure and decide which is in the right. Danhash readily consented, and after having the tower where the prince was confined pointed out to him, and making a wager with Maimoun as to the result of the comparison, he flew off to China to fetch the princess. In an incredibly short time, Danhash returned, bearing the sleeping princess. Maimoun led him to the prince's room, and the rival beauty was placed beside him. When the prince and princess lay thus side by side, an animated dispute as to their respective charms arose between the fairy and the genius. Danhash began by saying, Now you see that my princess is more beautiful than your prince. Can you doubt any longer? Doubt? Of course I do, exclaimed Maimoun. Why, you must be blind not to see how much my prince excels your princess. I do not deny that your princess is very handsome, but only look, and you must own that I am in the right. There is no need for me to look longer, said Danhash. My first impression will remain the same. But of course, charming Maimoun, I am ready to yield to you if you insist on it. By no means, replied Maimoun. I have no idea of being under any obligation to an accursed genius like you. I refer the matter to an umpire and shall expect you to submit to his verdict. Danhash readily agreed, and on Maimoun striking the floor with her foot, it opened, and a hideous, hump-backed, lame, squinting genius with 6 horns on his head, hands like claws, emerged. As soon as he beheld Maimoun, he threw himself at her feet and asked her commands. Rise, Cash, said she. I summoned you to judge between me and Danhash. Glance at that couch and say without any partiality whether you think the youth or the maiden lying there the more beautiful. Cash looked at the prince and princess with every token of surprise and admiration. At length, having gazed long without being able to come to a decision, he said, Madam, I must confess that I should deceive you were I to declare one to be handsomer than the other. There seems to me only one way in which to decide the matter, and that is to wake one after the other and judge which of them expresses the greater admiration for the other. This advice pleased Maimoun and Danhash, and the fairy at once transformed herself into the shape of a gnat, and settling on Camaralzaman's throat stung him so sharply that he awoke. As he did so, his eyes fell on the Princess of China. Surprised at finding a lady so near him, he raised himself on one arm to look at her. The youth and beauty of the princess at once awoke a feeling to which his heart had as yet been a stranger, and he could not restrain his delight. What loveliness! What charms! Oh, my heart, my soul! He exclaimed as he kissed her forehead, her eyes and mouth in a way which would certainly have roused her, had not the genie's enchantments kept her asleep. How, fair lady, he cried, you do not wake at the signs of Camaralzaman's love. Be you who you may, he is not unworthy of you. It then suddenly occurred to him that perhaps this was the bride his father had destined for him, and that the king had probably had her placed in this room in order to see how far Camaralzaman's aversion to marriage would withstand her charms. At all events, he thought, I will take this ring as a remembrance of her. So saying, he drew off a fine ring which the princess wore on her finger and replaced it by one of his own, after which he lay down again and was soon fast asleep.